at the triangle. Today we're still looking at the triangle. And we're looking, as we have for the last 3, maybe 4 sessions. And today we're looking at the triangle, turning rejected efforts into accepted efforts and the place of the performance life force in that. I want to say a couple of introductory things first. One, and terrific to see you, Vic. It's 36 days, I think, till May the 14th, okay? And, you know, I do, as I've said before, I do plan a year of what I'm calling celebration, even though we're small, not very well known. I think we can still do that. We can still have a year of celebration. I mean, a child's birthday is not less if the child is an only child rather than that lady. I think she's in California, who I read about recently, I'm intrigued by, has got 14 children. She's the one who had 8 in one go. Anyway, so no, I do want to say that. And I'm talking about Year of David, starting the 14th of May. However we put that together, being in touch with people, posting things. I've done tons of writing on David. I could bring that out. Vic, thank you, has highlighted his poems. I've got a copy of his poems. We could post one a month during that year. That'd be one thing. And we've also got Victor's article, Lamp on 4th Avenue, which we can also highlight more. We've got the NFB, National Film Board of Canada film, which we can highlight more. I plan to be in touch with them. The National Film Board of Canada are a very big deal in Canada, very big deal, because they're one of the best documentary film units in the world. They probably compete with the BBC, David Attenborough, part of the BBC, which produces all the nature films, and is based in Bristol, which is on the West Coast. But, you know, they produce mainly nature films. The NFB produces all sorts of stuff. And it's something else we can highlight. The man who directed that film, John Spotton, worked very closely with David, very closely with me. Also very closely with my first wife, Eva, the film. And I'm in the film. And the prison I worked at is in the film. And you know, we can highlight that stuff. It's there. It's interesting, and something else we can highlight, because there was a particular. Oh, I know. I was telling the story about John. His name was John Spotton. The National Film Board of Canada, NFB as it's always called, set up a theatre in Toronto. Toronto is Canada's biggest city. And that film is the John Spotton Theatre. So, you know, there's a bunch of, and the film he made about Dave I think, was the first film John Spotton made as a director. Prior to that, he had been a cameraman. But there's also something I'm not quite sure about the timing, because the film, the documentary film he's really famous for, is a documentary film on Buster Keaton, on the great Hollywood comedian. So, I mean, there's stuff we can draw on, and there's stuff we can reach out to other people and draw on them. I just heard yesterday that Elizabeth, the Elizabeth in Michigan, who occasionally comes to this forum, occasionally comes, she heard from Jack Gillespie, and he was someone who was with the activating unit and now lives in North Vancouver.
Jack Gillespie.
And might be Jake Gillespie. And my daughter lives in North Vancouver. David Pellin's daughter, his adopted daughter, stepdaughter, sorry. She lives in North Vancouver. Okay, there's all this North Van stuff. And, as anyone who knows Vancouver, it's just a bus ride to die for, to go from North Vancouver to into Vancouver, and then another bus into Kitsilano. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff we can draw on.
Can you tell me those names of those? You're telling me that these are all activator people that are currently living in North Vancouver, where I grew up?
Well, just one, Jake Gillespie. I'll find out more about him from Elizabeth, okay?
Okay, and the others are not currently living in North Van?
No.
Okay.
There was the name I mentioned here.
I'm just trying to remember. So did you, please forgive me for interrupting what you're saying. Jake Gillespie, he was involved with the activator unit or the ACT youth, did you say? What was that?
No, he was in the activator unit. I'm pretty sure, Vic, but I'll check on it.
I'm just curious that I don't quite remember that name, but was he a ring holder? Do you know?
I can't remember.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
Peter, was he at Pellin?
I think he was. Otherwise, because Elizabeth just mentioned it to me out of the blue. And to be quite frank, I was struggling with the name, okay? She said, I heard from this person, and then I thought, and she's in Michigan, and I thought, how can I remember this name? I couldn't remember, I was sort of struggling.
Me too.
But I think he wasn't Pellin. Otherwise, I don't think there's any way Elizabeth would have known of him.
Gillespie is vaguely familiar to me, but just like you, I'm struggling with the name, so I'm curious.
Yeah, I remember him from Pellin.
Rick, what was Rick's name?
What did Cecilia say?
I remember Jake Gillespie from Pellin. Jake Gillespie.
Okay. Now, he might be living in Vancouver and was not part of the activator. But
yeah, he was from Vancouver, yeah.
I think he was. And, I'm just sort of, throwing out ways that we can really have this year of celebration. And then, that comes to an end 14th of June, 2022. And a month and a day later is the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Pellin Institute. So we got, and that I'm going to call the year of Pellin, so it's the year of David, the year of Pellin.
Interesting.
And I think we can put a lot into that. And to be quite frank, it's not private, it doesn't need to be excluded. but it'll be a very easy way for me to be in touch with a lot of people. You know, it's like sending a Christmas card, you know. I can get really shy about just contacting, as Mary knows, about just contacting somebody out of the blue. But with these two 50-year anniversaries, I can contact anybody. And I want to use that. And obviously, I want help on it, because there's another part, and you'll understand this, Vic. The opening of the film is very much a hippie-looking guy walking down the street saying, "Georgia straight, Georgia straight, get your Georgia straight here." Now, the Georgia Strait is the body of water between the States and Canada. That's why it's called the Georgia Strait. Strait as in the English Channel was a channel. The Georgia Strait is the body of water between British Columbia and United States. Now, that film was made 68, 69. And this guy's walking down the street saying, "Georgia Strait, get your Georgia Strait here." Anyone who lives in Vancouver today, and I hope it hasn't folded, Vic, but the Georgia Strait is the free newspaper you pick up to find out about the music venues and the restaurants. It's still there. And last time I was in Vancouver, they've got a big building. They've got a big building at Granville and Burrard and Granville. You know, I can be in touch with Georgia Strait. You know, here is a bit of film that is locating your newspaper, you know, all those years ago. So I guess I just want to sort of share that with you because apart from anything else, obviously, you know, I'll need help. Big.
Maybe what I should do, or as we approach that time, is I should go down to 2150, 2150 or 2140 West 4th Avenue and do a selfie right in front of the door and then send it all over to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And also it's, you know, because those of us who've got a connection with Vancouver, and you know, that's where my two daughters live, one in North Vancouver, one in Vancouver Island, and where 2 + 4, 6 of my grandchildren are. So, you know, I've got all those connections there, huge connections. But I think we can, anyway, we say with pride, you know, when the surveys are done by the United Nations or the Economist magazine, you know, what is the most livable city in the world? And Vancouver always comes up about the first 1, 2, or 3. And the time between the activator unit, give me the number again, Vic.
Oh, it's either 2140 or 2150 West 4th Avenue. I could probably go on.
Ring bell to me.
2140 or 2150 West 4th. You carry on and I'll go on.
I've got it somewhere. Yeah, I've got an old leaflet somewhere, Vic. An activator unit leaflet, okay. But, and you know, I could write about this in Pellin terms. The story of Kit Solano, which is, it's hard if you live there to say Kit Solano, you just say Kits.
That's right.
You know, the story of Kit Solano from those times to now, which is also the story of Vancouver from those times to now. And as you know, I'm sure I mentioned it before, King's Lynn has all this stuff featuring Vancouver. I think I've mentioned that here. When I first came here, I was walking around. I was in very bad shape, just coming through the divorce, blah, 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 blah. And I look up and it said Vancouver Butcher. Vancouver Butcher? I wondered if I was disorienting a bit. And King's Lynn, Norfolk, England, which is poor and struggling, has made, Captain Vancouver was born in King's Lynn. So there's a statue of him. There's a Vancouver, I said the Vancouver Butcher. There's also a Vancouver Quarter. There's a Vancouver Garden, just across the way from where I live. So I guess I'm just getting, I'm deliberately taking this time now, to be quite frank, reaching out, sharing this stuff with you. And
there's 2150 West 4th Avenue right now. That's 2139. Sorry.
2139.
No, that's not the right address of the unit. I'm pretty sure it's 21.
What side of the street it was on, Vic?
Yeah, I'm on the wrong side. So let me just turn this around. Are you seeing what I'm doing?
Yeah, I can.
So which one is David's place?
That's
I'm not sure.
What you're doing is relevant to the stuff when I get into the material.
Yeah.
Wow. And this is what you're saying is super duper gentrified now, right, Peter?
So it is the most preferred place to live in Vancouver. Unless you want to be sort of elitist and present great wealth to the world. In which case you'd live on Point Grey or West Vancouver. Am I right?
Yeah. Well, you're provoking a lot of memories with this guy here. I mean, as a young teenager, I went up to West Vancouver in winter so that we could shovel snow off the roofs of the rich people, so their roofs didn't collapse, and we could make some money. So you're triggering a lot of memories here.
Yeah. So there's a lot we can get into. I think I'm right. Greenpeace and also one of the organisations, Save the Whales, were founded in Vancouver. There's a lot of stuff to draw on, and Vancouver, Canada, not good at blowing its own trumpet. There's no way if all this stuff was happening, it wouldn't be on opera and talk shows and all sorts of stuff. And tomorrow what you were involved in Toronto. Just disappears in Canada. Does.
Yeah.
Okay.
I heard that in the Vancouver Winter Olympics, we kept coming in with silvers, I think, but we didn't get one gold medal. And they really tried with the Canadian athletes to get them to go, we're number one. They actually hired psychologists to try to get Canadians to imagine not being, just to imagine that it wasn't rude to come in first when you were hosting the Olympics.
I know. Yeah.
That's
on the West Coast, we would blame that sort of Englishness on Ontario, okay?
Rightly so.
No, it's not called British Columbia.
Yeah, anyway, I think there's something there, and if I can produce something and run it by you and we see what we do with it, it could be really fun.
But this is what you're talking about, Canada, and what is the our relationship to the performance life force, and it's apologetic in some ways. And in terms of like feelings of accomplishment, I mean, I have such a punitive superego that I identify as being Canadian in its character, you know, in me. And I take tremendous pride in not making it, in coming in, yeah, like not being proud, not being vain. And you take pride, and there's tremendous vanity in not taking pride in yourself. It's just where you get your sense of pride is that you're not prideful. So it's
All of that.
I mean,
An inverted pride. Yeah.
yes,
was-
Interesting.
yes, it
Yeah.
is. And I really am,
Sorry.
and I struggle. And then to come to the States was just like it was just amazing to me. It was, and I embraced it to try to shrink some of my I mean, it's so hard to rewire your brain. And I wasn't even, I managed to spin things with more energy into being heartily self-destructive instead of just hurting myself quietly, but being punk when I came, like in the early 80s here in the States, you know. That was a twist that gave me more life juice, you know, where I could, you know, express my anger and, you know, not drop out like hippie drop out, but just not participate in the system, you know, with others wearing, what were they called? Those black boots, Doc Martens. So anyway, but yeah, the triangles, it's, man, it's really hard for me to develop new habits that are nourishing for me.
It's interesting you said that,
Thank you.
because it relates to what I want to get at today. There's a part I prepared, but I'm going to leave it till next Sunday, which is about the accessibility and the modernity of the material. That is going to be my pitch, because there's 2 years of celebration. And my pitch is going to be just how modern this material is. And anyway, sort of more on that next Sunday. I do want to just sort of recap before I get directly into the performance life force and changing rejected efforts into accepted efforts. And that is the practicality of the work, because my statement is the work is practical or it's nothing. And the triangle is certainly about being practical. There's no question. And this topic today and last Wednesday is turning rejected efforts into accepted efforts. That's absolutely practical. Because if you fail, you fail. You know, if it's still a rejected effort, it's still a rejected effort. You know, I don't want to go to work. The 6-year-old doesn't want to go to school. The husband doesn't want to go home. You know, was one thing David said. How do you put it? I haven't remembered this one in a long time, Vic. But he said, when you're walking down the street, and if you don't want to go in the door of home, that marriage is in trouble. That marriage is in big trouble. And essentially what he's saying, and it can happen to anybody, probably happen to everyone at some time, the marriage becomes a rejected effort. And, hospitality in its own way, and my statement about how much our work is draws on the collective intuitive wisdom that humankind have unconsciously developed over time, or common sense. And the hospitality industry knows that, right? They know how to put on a romantic holiday, a romantic dinner. Cynthia.
I just want to say that there's actually a study that was done when I was working in the firm, and they were in the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, and they did a study as to the biggest reason for a divorce. And yes, things like infidelity, money, communication were up there, but the biggest one was exactly what David Pellin said. They didn't reframe it in terms of rejected effort, but one or both of them is no longer committed to the marriage.
Yeah. Which is another way of saying the marriage is a rejected effort.
Right. So it's backed up by research.
No, the stuff you bring in is great. So just looking at the modernity of the work, that's one of the things I really want to develop. And we live in a different age. Once there were people called travel writers. That was a category, a genre called travel writers. And they were great travel writers, okay? Because how you found out about where to stay and where to eat was from a guide, okay? And that was a whole sort of thing. And the only people who could produce legitimate guides that had any legitimacy, were travel writers and expert travel writers. So someone would be known as a travel writer about Italy, but he or she would not claim to be able to write a travel book about the Caribbean. Bang. It's TripAdvisor. It's not experts, it's an accumulation of conscious intuitive wisdom. It's all these people writing their reviews. Just the same, you could not, all the years I grew up, you could not really write a legitimate literary review, a serious review of a book, unless you had academic or literary reputation in that field. And now anyone can write a review of a book. It's on Amazon. No one says Amazon's not valid. No one says TripAdvisor is not valid. No one says their reviews on Airbnb are not valid. No question. So we live in an absolutely different world. So I think our approach, which is accessibility, is very modern. Someone can, we haven't learned yet how to effectively use the internet, and we need to bring in some experts about that. And Mary has been looking into that. But just putting that one aside for a moment, the triangle, one of the modernity of our work is the way it can be grasped fairly easily And it not only can be grasped fairly easily because they're simple tools, and it can be grasped and someone can try it out, see if it has any vibe for them, to use that phrase, and not do any harm. That's simple tools, and that's the modernity of simple tools. The modernity of our simple words, straightforward words, the language of ordinary family conversation, is that not only can people grasp it, but anyone can challenge us. You don't have to have a background or an education in psychology or psychotherapy or any university education to challenge a Pellin concept. Someone could come in and say, well, I don't think that's true. I don't think I get lows after highs. Or I don't think the calm's that great. You know, my dad did that all his life, and you know, he was boring, whatever. But it can be challenged. And I think within that, and with these 2 years of celebration coming up, yeah, I think we've really got something to say about looking forward. And as you know, I love telling the stories from the past, okay? But so quite deliberately, I want to put this forward-looking, young-looking stuff in place. Now, when we come to turning rejected efforts into accepted efforts, I'm a bit high. I get high on talking about Kitsilano, no question. I can't resist this bit, I've probably said it before. But King's Lynn claims to have the oldest surviving working theatre in England. And there's a rumour, I don't think it's substantiated, that Shakespeare came to King's Lynn and played in King's Lynn. Not just Vancouver, but Kitsilano has a yearly Shakespeare festival, okay? Which rates, you know, the first one was in Ontario. Where is it, Tamara?
That was my best friend's father, Patterson, founded Stratford Festival.
Yeah.
In Stratford.
Stratford,
it's called Stratford in Ontario.
Yeah. So, and John Spotton was Ontario and Toronto. Yeah, that's the bit I need to get in my, yeah, anyway, I won't go there. Too much detail about the National Film Board. But there are these, going back to rejected efforts, and trying to get my focus there because I'm on the pendulum. We're looking at really, really serious stuff there. I mean, this is the stuff that, and thanks for your study, Cynthia, mentioning it. You know, this is the stuff that breaks marriages. This causes people to get into substance abuse. This causes people to kill themselves. David called he called the rejected effort the killer of the soul. He called his material on guilt, which I've not developed much, and I must get to, the most destructive hurt there is. But he very clearly.
The most destructive what there is? I didn't quite
hurt.
hear you. Oh, hurt. Thank you.
Yeah.
What was the most destructive? Guilt, did you say?
Yeah.
Oh.
He had a lot of material that he developed on guilt.
Well, I
I shouldn't say it that way. He had a bit that was really concise and tight, which I guess was sort of handed over to me. I've not particularly developed that bit. Vic.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that. So the most destructive hurt, I thought you said it was rejected effort, but you're saying it's guilt?
Yeah, it's guilt. I guess I wanted to put the two together, and I want to put the two together.
Right. I'm wondering if guilt can be
in terms of
connected to rejected
his
effort.
quotes. He called, because his teaching a lot was, when I got the film made, I sold him as an emotional teacher. To say he sort of taught with body language is an accurate description, but it's almost not quite enough. He just projected this stuff out, really very powerfully. And as we looked at on Sunday, you know, that led to difficulties around what we call performance life force. He was not resolved around his performance life force. So the performance life force is the source of confidence, is the source of us believing in ourselves. It's the source where we can say it's okay that I come first. You know, when I put, you know, my brief summaries, in the caring life force, you come first. In the material life force, money comes first. In the performance life force, I come first. And as both Mary and Cesar pointed out at other times, in the early days, performance life force had a rather bad press. And I guess I took that on a bit from Dave. That was because he always said what he was doing were for these people at this time. He didn't take it, the bit that I do with it, saying it's universal, it could be applied all over the place. But coming back to the performance life force and turning rejected efforts into accepted efforts, it's having the confidence, because the way to do that is to find gimmicks and to find at least, which are ways of bringing something positive in, positive feelings into the rejected effort. That's the aim of it. I mean, the simple thing is, you know, flowers on the desk, music in the factory, you know, a whole lot of industrial psychology, which I don't know much about, I'm not an expert on, but they.
So this is pretty interesting and obviously relevant to all of us, relevant to me right now, things that I'm struggling with. So I want to try and understand this. So you said something that I think is, and again, it's practical, it's quite interesting. You said introducing positive feelings into the rejected effort. That's really quite striking. And you also mentioned gimmicks. Normally we think of gimmicks in a negative way, but now we're talking about a positive context.
Yes.
What flashed into my mind was something about Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War. I can't quite remember the words, but maybe some of the other Americans here will remember it. But he said something about, I don't know, he introduced some humor into some dark moment, and someone said something to him about it. And he said something about not being able to carry on if he didn't have the humor or something like that. And it almost sounded like, well, I mean, I guess you could say the Civil War was a rejected effort at one point, and all the way through they felt that way, right? And he seemed to say something that seems to dovetail with what you're saying, to introduce something positive into a rejected effort. So one case, we're talking about the Civil War and Abraham Lincoln, but I'm also thinking, I've been through a marriage, and several of you have probably been through one or more. And I'm thinking of what that really means for for a marriage, as you say, to be able to introduce humor into a rejected effort or something. That sounds pretty significant to me. And at the moment, I'll leave it right there, but it sounds interesting.
No, it's very relevant. He would do it. They're talking about, Cynthia, sorry.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just wanted to get into the queue because I wanted to say something. But...
No, go.
Okay. Anyways, I'm going to, and it's also kind of a report. I'm kind of glad that we're doing this and I don't have to wait. But a report from last week when I brought my rejected efforts in, and one of the things that, and this relates to humor, I'll get to it. One of the things that Nikki noticed was when gave me feedback when I was talking about, bringing all my stuff out. And I realized that part of my problem with writing that I'm doing for my job is that it is sort of, my desk was looking cluttered, and it wasn't super cluttered, but just the way things were laid out. And and actually this helped bringing things with my marriage too. I thought, okay, and my spouse is really good with spatial things. I mean, I can organize in my head, but organizing physical spaces, I'm not great with. But I'm very organized in my head in terms of, so I said, I asked myself, do you have a moment to help me? And I pulled out all the stuff that I need to do this particular project, which is one of the ones that requires more stuff around. And I showed her, I said, look at this. This is my problem. And she says, oh, well, can you just move this over here and this over here? And then we saw this one thing that the riser I had with my computer was this big wooden box. And well, maybe I'll get a different riser for my computer and a different, in fact, I got this for my pens. And there wasn't choose, because she first asked me, do I need a bigger desk? I'm like, I don't know. And that's a big project. But she helped me make these little adjustments. And then I got right into, well, I also, before that, to give me sort of the courage, my head and my mind, because you had mentioned the performance life force, you didn't talk about it. I said, okay, writing actually is the performance life force, I think, in a lot of ways, or at least, even though it's not creative writing, but there's a craft to it. I mean, there's interpretation. And so I thought to myself, what do I need as an artiste to do my work? Thinking about, the performers in their green room, and, if they want the green M&Ms, and then that's when I thought of the more moons. And I think that's what's fun I think that makes the performance life force safer if you're not taking yourself too seriously. I was laughing with that. And I did, and I got the report done, and there's other things, but I'll stop there.
There's more books written about Abraham Lincoln. I think the only thing that more books have been written about is the Bible. Okay, and I've got a proportion of them. And you're totally right about that, Vic. Totally right about his humor. And it totally fits with how could he not change the rejected effort or accepted effort, but just bear it. And I guess in bearing it, he changed it. But, they're talking about, 45,000 killed the Bull Run, and they're talking about this, and he'd come in and say, well, that reminds me that what the preacher said to the widow, and then he's got some long story to tell. Extraordinary, just extraordinary. I don't think anyone has ever done that before. Because, his stories were, well, in that America, they were the West, they were the uncouth West. He was, Honest Abe, Log Cabin to White House, whatever. And he, you know, there were cartoons about him being represented as an ape, ape. So there's all that stuff going on, and then he'd almost go straight into it with this humor. And yeah, I think it's an example of what David called, and I still want to stay with the word, although I think we probably, in terms of accessibility, we probably need to come up with another one as well. But, you know, just staying with David's word of gimmick, and that's been bold enough to, yeah.
So I want to ask you a question. It's not distracting, it's on target, I believe. I remember the triangle being taught. It was the 3 points of the triangle were effort, goal, change, effort, goal, change. And I'd noticed that what in your diagram is effort, goal, reflection. And I find that quite interesting, because what I'm wondering, I guess the question I want to have is reflection something to do with the gimmick? So if you reflect on things in a different way than the rejected effort is telling you, you know, the rejected effort's reflection is this is bad, this is bad. To be honest, I'm a bit like that. And my wife corrects me at times in a beautiful, sweet way. She does this, you know. And so I guess I'm wondering how the term reflection got in there.
I didn't quite understand the bit that you said you do.
Which part?
The bit where you said what you do is.
Oh, well, I can be, you know, stuck in the rejected efforts of things,
Right,
and be
right.
being negative. My wife has a wonderful, sweet way
Yeah.
of turning me around, and I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking that's kind of what we're talking about, the gimmick of turning a rejected effort into a positive effort. But I'm also wondering, because I remember the triangles effort, goal, change, and you've got effort, goal, reflection. How did that come about? And does that reflection have something to do with a gimmick or a technique? Because this sounds interesting to me, because to be able to turn, and I think this is what your whole message about is to be able to turn a it's a pretty big deal, to be able to turn a rejected effort into an accepted effort, and to know what you're doing. This sounds like a really significant life skill to me, and I'm wondering how the reflection part.
Yeah. Well, to be quite frank, I could never make the triangle work. And I was actually having meetings at my apartment with Dave, my wife Eva, me, and I think Dawn, his wife, came to some of them, literally working on the triangle, working on,
Interesting.
you know, sort of transcribing the triangle and making more sense. I think it was part of the work he just hadn't finished.
Thank you.
And he'd finished the bottom line, okay? And to me, I didn't spend a lot of time with it because I was developing other parts. And I turned it in what is the contribution training manual. And the way it's there, it's called steps. So I turned it into a series of steps. But then I was frustrated about that because I just like his diagrams. I think his diagrams are genius, just genius. You know, manic depression, clinical depression, melancholia and ages before that, Winston Churchill's Black Dog Days, bipolar. All of that is in the pendulum. All of that is in the diagram of the pendulum. I mean, that's pretty extraordinary. And I can make that claim. But I just don't think all his absolute originality and beautiful mind had finished this bit of it. I think it just was unfinished. And then I couldn't make it work because the whole thing is about change. So then I wanted to make the two sides. You know, I came from the place, come hell or high water, I'm going to bring the triangle back, okay? But then I had to make it logical. And the way he had it, it broke down. It wasn't logical.
Well, I'm thinking very quickly, I'll say, I'm thinking that you're not going to get change without reflection. And that's kind of interesting. And
Yeah, and also I've got a thing, but to be quite frank, reflection, you know, credit where credit's due, is Mary's brother, Alan. He's developed a whole series of work that is influenced by Pellin, but not only. He works as a consultant. He was a head primary school teacher, and now he's a consultant to head primary school teachers. And he's developed a series of programs that he calls reflection and action. Now, I can say the top of the triangle is reflection, and the bottom is action. And, you know, me and some large number of other folk. I don't know if it's jealousy or anger, it's probably a combination of both. But mindfulness is just being discovered as if it wasn't around before. And I was at a meeting today with some very sophisticated professional people. I'll tell you about that another time. And it was like it's this new thing. Well, what about yoga? Hasn't it been around for a rather long time? But anyway, in terms of being a bit more sensible about reflecting the fashionable trends rather than being a reverse snob and being always against them, which is me. You know, I think reflection action really works. So the top is reflection, and that is mindfulness. And the bottom is action. I think it works. And then I don't think I can put my hand, no, I can't put, I won't try and put my hand on the diagram. But the right hand hypotenuse, that's the word, isn't it? That's making a decision. And the left hand hypotenuse is making assessments about what we've been through. So I guess as we get it tighter, the right-hand hypotenuse is looking to the future, and the left hand is assessing the past.
I feel a little silly asking you this now because review the bottom of the triangle is rejected efforts.
Yeah, the bottom of the triangle is just accepted efforts and rejected efforts, okay?
Okay.
It's sort of experiencing them and recognizing them. So the bottom of the triangle.
Somehow for me, it's very closely related to feelings of accomplishment. Like those seem to go back and
they're almost, and I want to make this really clear, accepted efforts and feelings of accomplishment are essentially the same thing. But it's just, and this is a skill he had, an originality he had, is just looking at that from slightly different angles, which gives it more depth. But essentially, feelings of accomplishment and accepted efforts are essentially the same.
I believe I remember David saying that.
Yeah. So performance life force is being creative, being imaginative, being able to be crazy, try crazy things, try unusual things. I have some of them, and I'm, I can count on the fingers of one hand the number of people I've shown my pens, I've told about my pens, and two of them are here, okay? I'll do it for a third time, I beg. I have colored pens that are like this, and I have 16 of them.
Oh, right.
And I have 16 different colors of ink, okay? And I'm sort of shy about saying that. Nikki, I've just lost it for a minute. The pop star with a model railway. Rod Stewart, I've got it. Yeah, Rod Stewart, I saw it first. There's a guy in England, he's a well-known, he's not known internationally, he's a well-known BBC popular music host. His name is Jules Holland. And I was just sort of looking around, the magazines in the supermarket. And there was this model railway magazine. And the cover picture was Jules Holland with his model railway, which is huge and detailed, and he'd been working on it for years. And I told Nikki that story, and she said, Rod Stewart does the same thing. And he takes parts of his model railway that he's working on. And I think at times he rents an extra room in the hotel for some of his model railway. And he works on it. And you say a bit about that, Nikki. You know a bit. I only know it from you.
Well, that's what he used to do. He's finished it now. It ended up in his home in California, and he's currently, I believe, having it shipped over to England, where he lives most of the time now. And when I went to see him in concert, and he was singing, what's it called, the song about the train, downtown train, he had it displayed, filmed up behind him. And he announced, he said, I bet like you, Peter, about the pens. I mean, I'd never heard it before. I guess when he used to do it, when he used to be on the road and he'd hire another hotel room for all his equipment for painting tiny little windows into office blocks and stuff. It's not just the railway, it's a whole city. It's a massive thing. It's a whole city, cross between New York and Chicago, he said. And anyway, I bet when he used to do that, he never told anybody. But now that it's done, and he stood and he announced in front of 20,000 people at the O2 Arena, I am a proud model railway enthusiast. And then there is this film of it behind him as he's singing the Downtown Train. It's just vast, this thing. I mean, it looks, it's all, filmed from above and scooped around, and it looks like a city. It's got, complete landscaping, pulls on the streets and houses and everything. So it's way more than the railway.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. And I don't think there's any doubt with both these who work in the music industry very successfully. Jules Holland is very successful. National treasure, BBC icon type. Okay. There are other ways to make the rejected effort of all the time in the hotel room. That's for sure. there are ways that you get into accepted effort, quote unquote. You know, it's drugs and booze and sex, you know, all of which are laid out for you. You almost just got to pick. And, you know, that almost to bring that example in, it's how subtle and delicate, yes.
You know, it almost seems to me, again, just to strike into the depth of what you're saying, and I think of my life and my time, you know, on the streets and coming to David Pellin, but also someone that I'm trying to help. It almost seems to me that people get into a hell of a lot of trouble, just not understanding what is happening to them in terms of a rejected effort. If you get into, correct me if I'm wrong, or if you get into a, I don't know if the word is a cycle or a bottoming experience of rejected efforts, it tends to reinforce itself and reproduce itself. And it gets very negative. And I think that if I look back on my life and people that I'm trying to help, etc., people just don't understand what's actually happening to them. And if they really understood what you're saying about turning a rejected effort into an accepted effort, and that doesn't mean getting a different effort, it means having a different, awareness towards what's actually happening. And that's where the reflection comes in. This sounds like a pretty big deal to me, because I think a lot of people go down, and you mentioned drugs, drugs, booze, and sex, and marital infidelity, whatever, because they just don't understand what's actually happening to them. And the understanding that you're conveying, and from David and from contribution training, it sounds like tremendously significant if a person could get that into their head, and I'm still trying to.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that, particularly, we share those roots, because that confirmed for me my determination to bring the triangle back. Because my thing about steps didn't have anyway just the impact of the triangle, the pendulum, and in terms of, and that's our methodology, and that's our methodology in terms of our methodology of tools, is recognizing the rejected efforts and just facing it, and almost historically drawing on the pretty good, said he snobbishly, psychotherapist, California, William Glasser, who developed reality therapy. And reality therapy is essentially working with kids, what we then call juvenile delinquents, not going back into what we call memory links. It has its limitations, but it was really good. For me, it was useful. Okay, at times you can just make something simple. So, and as I've said elsewhere here, and I think I want to develop the terminology around it. We have a slightly overstuffed toolkit box, okay? There's sort of too many tools in it, so we've got to be a bit careful about that. We've got a lot of stuff. It's very comprehensive. It's called thought and practice. But it's just recognizing the accepted effort, the rejected effort, and almost for a time, not going into the memory links, but just, and it's straight behavioral stuff, just recognizing the rejected effort and almost saying to ourselves, this is a rejected effort. In terms of my work about the wheel of change, Cynthia.
Yeah, I'm going to keep going because and come in on this and back to the story I was trying to tell before, because what you're talking about, recognizing the accepted efforts and also assessment, really plays into. And I have to admit, I'm feeling a little bad because it was kind of ignored, and I was feeling a big sense of accomplishment because I managed a really big rejected effort to an accepted effort because of the help I got last week. So I'm dealing with that a little bit, but I'm going to use my performance and do me first and say what what happened with that. Afterwards, I did have one of the reports. I had a client who, and I talked about this with Mary and with Tamara and Elizabeth, but we had a client who had ordered a report, and it ended up being, it was going to be a day later. There was some communication problem. And I said, well, it's going to be, I had a bad reaction to my second COVID shot, and I'm a couple days behind. And she said, please refund my monies. And I had just gotten all this to an accepted effort, and I could just feel my accepted effort go boo. I said, no, you know what? I've got to protect this accepted effort, and I'm not gonna, my perseverance strata came out. I'm just not gonna let this go. And I said, okay. So I wrote wrote to Mary and stuff, and Elizabeth, and they kind of helped me through this, the thing, that was, and then I thought, you know what, okay, maybe this client was unreasonable, she was, but I've been really bad about getting things on time to people, and that's not something that I want to do. So I said, okay, but first I dealt with this, I'm going to keep this, and then I sort of, I guess the reflection, I have a gimmick, it's a great gimmick if you like role-playing games, because there's somebody made this thing like an organizational thing that turns everything you do into a role-playing game. And so and it's very it's very flexible, so you can rearrange it. So I managed to, I thought through of how to incorporate having things done on time into my thing. So I did that, and I said, okay. And then actually I was really pleased, because before, if something like that happened and I had a rejected effort that started to a fragile accepted effort, I would just deflate. I would get into this whole big thing. I'd get high on the pendulum. I would get all mad at the person. I said, no, just keep going. And also now I know that guilt, pressure, and that kind of thing doesn't help. So I don't do, so don't get into that. She may, but there is really something in terms of, I do need to get on time. I mean, if I'm doing a business, I need to be reliable. I have to have things on time. So I did that. And anyways, I guess I'm also sharing this is because I'm kind of proud of myself. And anyways, and I'm also very grateful. I mean, the suggestions here were just having that feedback and the suggestions was really good. So, well, I also remembered the memory links. That's why that around guilt and shame and pressure and, that kind of thing, because that just brings me into the whole, nothing I do will ever be good enough. So, so anyway, so I shared and I got that out, and
Yeah.
sorry, I was a little aggressive about that, but
thank you for sharing. Yay.
and we also might want to consider what to name this.
One is the success of all of us. It's a vicarious, this is a victory for us all.
Actually, I was thinking of maybe changing the title of this one. My thought was maybe history of Pellin and general discussion of the triangle, because we didn't really do what you said, a few sentences here and there, but it's not quite what.
I appreciate that, because the format I want is the Sundays are representing a topic, and then Wednesdays are going to be like we did last Wednesday. People, including myself, bringing in examples. So I appreciate you picking that up, because we can continue the teaching a bit, but really for next Wednesday, bring examples of rejected efforts, and perhaps examples of your performance life force. Okay. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say this, my shyness comes in, but my hair is short and my Breton sweatshirt is what Picasso wore towards the end of his life, okay? I mean, it's not accidental at all. And that's about finding, forgive me, that's about finding the performance life force. And what I said today is about modernity. It's about the world where it is now, about the world where it's going to be over the next 20 or 30 years. That's what our material is. And that deliberately taking on that my age and the way people perceive it could turn things into a rejected effort. You know, the example you gave, Cynthia, is really, really important. And I guess if you bring it, I'm being a little, no, I'm not being dramatic there. They're the heaviest things, okay? But if someone gets a bad appraisal, right? Amazon has 6 months of appraisals. My son gets them. He gets a bad one. That sort of colors the whole thing. You gotta, and I think this is where I work. I do draw on ordinary, unconscious, intuitive wisdom. People have a sense of sort of struggling through it. Okay. Yeah, you could say that one of the strengths, glories of a good marriage is someone who will pick you up when you're in a rejected effort and say, you know, come on, honey, you know, let's go out to Trader Vic's, or you know, let's go to the Four Seasons. Or if it's a bigger rejected effort, look, honey, I really want to talk to you. We need to spend 6 days in Hawaii. Okay, you need that. And, you know, you could certainly conceive Michelle Biden saying it to Barack, or Joe Biden saying it to Joe, or Joe saying it to Jill, or Barack saying it to Michelle. You know, look, you've written a bestseller. You've been on a worldwide successful tour. And I think you're a bit stressed out. And I think Hawaii is a better solution than more clothes. Who knows? You know, because I guess the gimmicks that work for us once. Michelle can't keep buying more clothes. I can't keep buying more pens. Okay. So we got to, and I think that's why the word gimmick is important, because I think it indicates that it needs to be creative, imaginative, try things big.
I'm going to have to leave here in a moment, but what's interesting to me, just very quickly, is this word gimmick, and connecting it to the performance lifestyle. Because I'm assuming, if you talk, and Mary will be able to come in maybe after I leave, because I'm going to have to leave. But you know, if you talk about movie making and acting and everything, I imagine there's a lot of gimmicks that go into making a good movie or making you know, a good performance, right? And so that's kind of interesting. I'm going to have to run now. What I want to quickly do, if I may indulge me, please. This is me first again. What is that? You mentioned travel, and have a look at that.
Yeah.
We talked about Canadian history, right?
Yeah.
That's the guy with his hand up, not the guy with his hand up. The other guy is my dad, and that's the Dirty 30s riding the rails in Canada.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Fantastic.
Going through the Rocky Mountains on top of a freight train looking for work.
All right.
Here's the last one. Here's the last one. That's my daughter in the Rocky Mountains about 30 years ago, 20 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have to run, and I apologize because I've got another meeting to go to. But I'll just
you
say,
know,
go ahead.
bringing in photographs is a gimmick that makes
Exactly right. Exactly right. Isn't it interesting how we've exalted the meaning of the word gimmick in such a positive way, right? Because there's a negative connotation. I have to run. I just want you all to know that I'm really, really grateful for being here, and I'll be coming back, and so I can't be more consistent, but I have other things going on Sunday. So it's been wonderful to talk to you all, and I look forward to these years of celebrations that are coming up.
Okay.
Stay safe and be well, okay?
Yeah.
Bye, Vic.
Bye, Vic.
Thanks for retitling this, Cynthia.
Is that okay? History of Pellin and general reflections on the triangle.
Yes. And then I think we should make next Sunday the same title as this one, because it's a really big issue. You know, how we can use our imagination, at times a little bit crazy, to enjoy some of our most difficult times. And that's a big deal. So we're going to just have the same title. And then Wednesday, I still want the format of, I think, picking up your title, Cynthia, I think we can just say general examples of the triangle. I don't think it has to focus on rejected efforts on Wednesday, but it could be rejected effort.
Can I ask if it's possible? I find it really, really helpful, to bring in some of the stuck places that I have in terms of working with and thinking about stuck places that my clients are struggling with. And I know this is a case consultation, but to apply these tools, and for me to be holding a client in mind feels like the next step for me, that somehow sometimes I understand this stuff better when I start to bring it into my work. We have a lot of therapists here.
Yeah. I think that's fine. And I also think, just sort of philosophically, I almost like to extend that.
Yeah.
And of course, we can have confidentiality and change personal details.
Oh, yeah, I know. But I mean, just to apply it to our work, whatever our work is.
And this is where the Pellin approach is different. It could be clients, it could be friends, it could be family members.
Yeah.
But third person. And I think that's possible because one of the things I've been thinking about recently is trying to make more of the wheel of change. And one of the things I like about the wheel of change, the point of entry could be any of those 5 things.
Mm-hmm.
Sharing, listening, feedback, learning, action. And for some people, it's learning. For some people, it's reading a book, okay? Or for some people, it's talking about somebody else, not talking about themselves. So it's not as if, oh, you have to start with sharing, you have to be transparent. It's entering the arena of change, whichever entrance is right for you. Yeah, so yes, definitely. So we're going to each of us going to try and bring some material on Wednesday. Okay, we'll finish up there. I'm in Norfolk in England, and it's later than it was earlier, but it's not dark yet. We'll go geographically. Nikki?
I'm Nikki, I'm in Wimbledon, where it's also later than it was earlier.
That's my existential discovery. Cynthia?
I'm Cynthia. I'm in Kankakee, Illinois, and it's a little after 1:30.
Okay. Tamara?
I'm Tamara in San Francisco, and time appears to be rolling forward here as well.
Okay. Okay, Mary, we've gone west, now we're going south.
I'm Mary in Rosary Beach, just after 11:30.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to put that earlier, that background, I guess background to the year celebrating David. Thank you. And watch this space. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right,
Bye.
bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.